Gaming is temporary, or at least modern gaming, and I never really thought that would be the case, and yet, here we are. I am someone who owns more games than I can count, both on Steam and physically. I have shelves and shelves of games around me. I hope to spend whatever retirement I get playing every game in my backlog until I die. But increasingly, the likelihood of me being able to do that kind of stops around the year 2010. Games continue to disappear. Servers continue to be taken offline. Services continue to be shut down. And yet the games I played as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, are still available. And I'm always left asking why. But not a productive why. It's more of a rhetorical why, because we know the reasons why. Data collection, monetization, corporate greed. Any number of things could be answered as to why games are tied to being always online, why games are delisted these days, licensing costs, all of that, why servers are shut down. But knowing why doesn't make me any less sad. It's more of a shout at the sky, why kind of feeling. And it's exhausting. There was just news that a recent Forza Horizon game is just getting delisted and taken away. Games that people would still want to play. This is especially sneaky and common in games where, in franchises where it's a series of games where they're constantly releasing new ones. The logic is that no one would miss the old ones, but as we have learned from at least multiplayer gaming, that's rarely true. There's special DLC and special car skins and levels in 4 that isn't available in other games. Just recently, Xbox Live went down. Just completely, the services went down. It was very confusing. My kid, he's not of reading age yet, but he has learned to play Minecraft on the Xbox. He took an interest in it, and neuroplasticity is an amazing drug. It's not a drug. And within a week or so, he learned how to use the controller and is now pretty much a master at it. He mostly plays creative or the peaceful mode of survival, although he does have a normal survival mode that he plays with us, but he gets kind of scared of the monsters. And once or twice a week for half an hour or an hour, we let him play. And we had such a window just recently, and I was going to let him play while I did some house chores, things like that. We're in the middle of a heat advisory heat wave. It's mid to high 90s outside. Really not safe. I got pretty decently sunburned just mowing the grass for an hour. Like, we're not going outside. And he was hyped to finally play Minecraft. And I go to log in, and it won't sign me into Xbox. I check all the server pages, Xbox's own status page. Everything says it's fine. Down detector, no reports. I try for like 20 minutes and eventually give up. You know, we rebooted the router, rebooted the Xbox, whatever. Come to find out later, it was offline and he never got to play that day. And realistically, boohoo, first world problems, not a big deal. Really wasn't. He took it surprisingly well. We pivoted, did something else. But I just think about that, especially as a kid who grew up well into teenager age, where I only had limited times to play games. Like, I had my Game Boy I could take with me everywhere pretty much, but like, otherwise I did not have a whole lot of screen time. I could not put the hundreds of hours into games that all my friends could. I had very limited windows of screen time. It would have broken my brain to have the window where I was allowed to play a game and the game just be unavailable. The game that I own, that's on my console, and for a lot of people, even the games from their disc, put it in the system, and you can't play it because some server isn't working right. For a single-player game that came out, or, you know, first started releasing betas and stuff back in, like, 2009, that I've been playing for half of my life. Like, what? What? Now, yes, there are some fixes. If the Xbox was my home Xbox, I could have just taken it offline and played then. I have the Xbox in my office that I use for work purposes. That's my home console. Whatever. There were... That's not the point. The point is that we are further and further into this paradigm where we own nothing, we control nothing about our gaming experience, and it's kind of terrifying. We buy the game, we don't own it, we don't get the right to play it at any point in time that we want. It could either go offline, because even just standard single-player RPGs require always online access these days, or games that you often play in single-player, something like Diablo, is moved more and more to an online service game, and thus You can't play it offline. We have entire consoles like PS5 and Xbox One both really struggle to run any games if you don't have an internet connection at all. This has been a big thing that a lot of people are tracking. Most games themselves, you get the disc and it's basically a license key. Yeah, sure, there are lots of little indie games and whatever that you pop the disc in and it runs from disc, and that we celebrate those. There are entire Twitter accounts dedicated to tracking those and celebrating them. That's awesome. But a lot of the major studio games, you either don't have the whole content on disc, or you have to download and activate it, or there's updates that kind of prevent you from running it. There's a million reasons you can't play games these days. There's games that constantly just get delisted, taken offline. There's a few that I've wanted to cover that thankfully have come back online, so that's been pretty good. But games keep getting delisted more and more, just never to be seen again. DLC taken down, licensing taken away. The accessories for the old games, even though they were made by the millions and millions, suddenly are way too expensive to find. Have you tried buying a 3DS lately? One of the most popular handheld systems, actually the most popular handheld system ever released, but one of the most popular gaming systems of all time ever released. And if you try to buy one, especially one of the new model, you're paying out the butt for this system, because, and same thing for Pokemon games and stuff. Nintendo fans just hoard them and collect them, and they become impossible to acquire for a reasonable price. Even though everything else, you can get Nintendo 64s dime a dozen, you can get Xbox Ones dime a dozen, Switches, whatever. But as soon as stuff just goes off sale, everyone hoards them and starts charging way too much for them. You buy a new game for your system, single player game, like Tony Hawk or something. Instead of just popping the disc in and streaming Offspring or whatever music they have on it and jamming out and playing, you are beholden to multiple hours of updates depending on your internet connection. Everything from the console to your game to your controller has updates. And then it can all be taken away, because when those servers go offline, so much stops working. I remember when PSN went down, PlayStation Network, back in 2011, I think. I was just starting college or either finishing high school. It was that last year in between. And it was a big deal. PSN had just been a huge deal on the PS3. It was really starting to finally gain traction and start competing with Xbox Live. And there was they got compromised and the whole thing went down for a long time. And it sucked, especially if you were someone who wanted to play multiplayer online gaming. But you still got to play everything you had. Everything that didn't require multiplayer, you could play just fine. There was none of this. Some of this is an Xbox problem, disproportionately more on Xbox than, say, PlayStation, and definitely more so than Switch, a system that's designed to play offline. But PC and lots of multi-platform games have this same problem. Everything is an app now. Everything is a service. Everything is a subscription. Everything is use it on our terms and continue paying us for it over time instead of just buying it and doing with it as you want. And we've gotten to the point, for the longest time, I remember there were backlashes to, there was major backlash to every change along the way up until a certain point, which I call the Fortnite era. When we started getting DLC on the disc, what we called Day Zero DLC or Day One DLC, or Day One updates. Big backlash. Huge deal. Ubisoft was bad about that. EA was bad about that. You could buy a game, and immediately there's already extra content that you have to pay for. That was clearly done for launch. Then we got into season passes to go with our DLC. Normal DLC was fine with expansions, map packs, whatever. But then there were season passes for it, where you were expected to just buy a promise that you're going to get the content later. And then we started transitioning into subscriptions and into battle passes to where a $60 game that came feature complete with a single player, multiplayer, a couple extra modes, custom content, whatever, turned into either a free-to-play or a $40 game, and then you pay $200 or more over a couple years to get all the content for it. Or microtransaction hell in the case of Fortnite, where you're just FOMO'd into buying all sorts of skin and preying on children for it. around that time, the backlash kind of stopped. And I have noticed anytime I talk about this publicly, and social media is a dumpster fire these days anyway, but every time I talk about this publicly, there is clearly a generational gap now of gamers who grew up in this Fortnite era who don't understand that it didn't used to be this way. Who don't understand that the 20 plus years of gaming consoles that I've had before then never needed a home console and never had any issue with playing without internet. Where you owned a game, you played it forever. I can still go back and play. I mean, Epic just delisted recently the Unreal Tournament games, and that is a huge crime against gaming, in my opinion. There's a lot wrong with that. Epic's turning into a horrible company, or I guess already has been. But, like, I can still go back and play Unreal. I can go back and play lots of old shooters. The Quakes, the Unreals, the Combat Arms, the older... I can still go play original Halo CE and have servers hosted and play it today. And there are developers that still support their older games. Like, you can go back and play RuneScape Classic as well as old school RuneScape. Those are two separate things on top of the modern version of RuneScape. Guild Wars. You can play Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. You can still play the old EverQuest. But anything released by, like, modern AAA publishers, good luck. You can still go back and play some of the Call of Duties, but they are slowly shutting those down. And we just got the news, which I will have a whole separate video on, but you're watching some very bad gameplay from. We just got the news that Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline on the older consoles are shutting down. They're going away, and the Xbox 360 store itself is going away. We don't own games anymore. We don't own anything about our gaming experience anymore. The gaming that we have now is temporary. And when it's already hard enough to avoid giving into the FOMO, the fear of missing out, of jumping on the latest live service game because it might be shut down in a couple months. Games like Helldivers being reported as already losing 90% of its player base. It was a flash in the pan spike in players. It's still going to be playable, but like those kinds of consequences, or games like Anthem, which basically just go completely offline. I never got to play it. I was waiting for it to get patched up so I could play it. It's hard enough to not give into FOMO for that kind of stuff. And the fact that all games now are doing this, it just pressures people more and more into buying them, which has some degree of short-term financial success. And I think we saw a few years ago the like bubble of that. But I think we're now seeing the burnout of that, of eventually people just stop responding positively to this and just stop buying stuff. And it's really disappointing. It's a bummer, man. I love my older games. I love my older game systems, and I will always praise them and play them. But, like, that doesn't mean I don't want to play new games. And there's plenty of positive lights in the gaming scene that we can look out to as, like, exceptions and setting the example for what to do. We got games like Baldur's Gate and wonderful studios like Larian. There's tons of indie releases that are kicking butt right now. And there's tons of innovation in the handheld space with, like, the Steam Deck and its competitors and whatever. But we're watching the AAA and what is apparently forming a quadruple A scene just continuing to, like, turn into a black hole and, like, just compress on itself. And what comes out the other end is either going to be a complete crash or just a hideous monster. And while there are plenty of indie and smaller published games that are wonderful, that's not what most people grow up remembering fondly. That's not where a lot of our big experiences come from. Just because the caliber of game, the stories that are told, are often quite different. There are still plenty of... I'm not pretending indie games can't be as good as or better than AAA. There's been countless examples of the opposite. Of course they have. But you like your franchises. You like your core games. You like your games that really set the memories. And those also come from AAA. I don't know. Obviously, you need both, but I just... This entire YouTube channel is focused on owning your gaming experience, taking control of it. I just posted a video on how to archive your PS1 memory cards just because that was a rabbit hole I randomly went down recently. It's all about that and just the positivity and the fun of gaming, and I very much want to stick to that for the most part. When there are times when I just look at the news about gaming, between the studios being shut down after a successful game to layoffs to games being completely removed to entire services being shut down. And I just worry that my kid is not going to have the same fondness for his gaming experiences. Because everything's going to be so effed up by the time he gets there. And that I'm not going to have an entire new half a wall, a shelf of newer games to add to my backlog for when I retire, to share with my kids and to play myself. That it's going to end at the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. And that's it. I'm going to have, like, I already only have a small stack of Xbox One, PS4, PS5 games in here. I worry that that's it. Like, instead of continuing to scale this so I have experiences to relive and re-explore forever, like, that's just... it's where the good times ended. If you weren't there to play the specific multiplayer event at the time. I don't know. You've been watching some really bad Battlefield 3 gameplay. I went back and played it on 360 before it's shutting down soon, and it is a bad time. It is a really bad time. Between the network ping, between the game runs at like 25 FPS, it feels like, and but I just wanted to talk about this with some vintage gameplay, I suppose. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Remember to be kind, rewind.
Bad guy, because they know who tried to use their platform to prey on minors.